Alright guys, today I'm here working on the 2001 Kawasaki Vulcan, and in the last video I pulled off the carburetor, cleaned it all out. I'm kind of doing this video as if this was your first bike, which you could get for a little bit of money, and try to keep it on a short, tight budget. We rebuilt the carburetor on this bike. We have it running now. Runs pretty decent. So the next thing I'm going to do is some of the maintenance issues. And while I had the throttle cables off to lubricate, I lubed them, but I had to take them off to get the carb, get enough tension loose on the carburetor to pull the carburetor off. You can go back and watch that video. But what I'm doing now is going to lube up the cables. Well, I already lubed the cables, but I'm going to start putting the controls back together. Also on this bike, the brake light switch was corroded, and so we cleaned the terminals on that. So you can go back and look at that too. Maybe I'll include it in the video here. But also, we are just going to reinstall everything on here, do a little maintenance. Sorry if you hear some noise in the background. I've got my little puppy out here and he's tearing up a box basically. So what we're going to do is just do some of the general maintenance on this bike and get it ready to go back on the road. So I'm just trying to show you that you can get into motorcycling, especially your first bike, really cheap. And what I want to do is take this bike through start to finish, when I bought it to when I got it on the road, and then possibly when I sell it, and see if you can make some money off of your first bike if you buy it cheap enough and just put in some work yourself. So that's kind of why I'm doing this video. You know, it's a nice bike. You can get a nice bike at a really cheap price. So let's get to work. Alright, here's what I use on the cables and on my chain. This chain wax, I really like it because it not only goes on like a grease and gives it lubrication, but it also kind of dries like a wax, so it's still slippery, but it just seems to protect and stick where it goes. I've already done these cables, and just what I did was just kind of set these cables up, spray down the cables until it starts dripping out of the other end, and so I've done that on both cables already. So now we're going to, I like to put a little bit of grease. As you can see, this grip, the accelerator is a little sticky, so what I'm going to do is just clean this up a little bit, and I'm just going to put a nice thin layer of grease on here, just so it can slide, and has a little bit of lubrication in there just to make it slide a little bit, and then we'll hook all these cables back up. Okay, so like you can see here, hopefully in the video it picks up, I just rubbed a little thin layer of grease on here on the handlebars, and just put the tube back in and just move around a little bit. It doesn't have to be much, at least I don't use much. And so now we'll hook the cables up, the accelerator cable and or throttle cable, get those back on, and I'll probably have to kind of tell you what I'm doing after I do it, and so you can see it, because I don't have anything to hold this camera on and while I put it on. Alright, so I had to feed both cables up through the handlebar or the controls assembly, and then it goes kind of just pinches together. We'll screw those back in, and we'll have this part of the controls taken care of. Alright, so I had to feed both cables up through the handlebar or the controls assembly, and then it goes kind of just pinches together. We'll screw those back in, and we'll have this part of the controls taken care of. Alright, so on these hand controls, I don't know if you can tell here how nasty this screw is. I actually bought a new screw because I had lost one but then found it. I'm gonna hit the screw on the wire wheel, see if I can clean it up a little bit. And then also this one down here is in pretty nasty shape. I don't know why this piece here, I guess it's just this grip is kind of slid down. These grips are in pretty bad shape. I may replace them, but again, this is a budget build for someone who's kind of doing their first time bike. So little things like this grip that's kind of worn, you know, it's not necessarily something you want to fix right now. You can wait a little while and see what happens. You know, if you love the bike, then decide to do some of these little upgrades of changing grips. But first, get the bike running, see what you've got, and enjoy it a little bit, and then you can start doing the little upgrades as you go. All right, one thing that I forgot to mention when you're putting these together, there's a notch on this cover that fits into a hole that's drilled into the handlebars so that they go on there straight and that they hit the right place. So just kind of keep that in mind. But get the two screws in, got the screw in here to hold the throttle cables that throttle cables that kind of separate them out. So got those all in place. Throttle's working a lot smoother than it was. So now we're going to move on probably to the clutch cable. So take a look at that. Alright guys, before I take this clutch cable loose to lube it, I was checking the free play, and the book says that it should have 2 to 3 millimeters of free play. And this one, I don't know if you can read it, but has almost 4 millimeters of free play in the clutch here, about 4 millimeters. So we're going to go ahead and loosen this up so we can lube the clutch cable, and then we'll readjust it when we're done. Alright, so here's what I do is I use the Motion Pro chain lube, and I just spray the chain lube down, and it forces it down the cable, which I keep forcing it down until it comes out the other end. And you clean up that mess, that'll burn off, or actually come off the frame pretty easy. And so that's how I lube my cables. And this is a pretty long cable, so it takes a little while of just kind of forcing it through. I don't just sit there and hold it down. Just kind of put it up there with a little bit of the chain wax can and just kind of give it little squirts until it works its way all the way down. And then that cable will be lubed. If you've never seen this little chain, or I'm sorry, I don't know if I said chain, but cable lube, it's just this little plastic housing that's in here, and your cable slides right up in it. You push the little straw through the hole, and then you tighten everything down, and it makes it a lot tighter around your cable so that the lube goes down where it needs to instead of all over the place. And it saves you a little time and a little bit of a mess with the trying to just squirt it down the cable. And I like this little setup. It works pretty good. Alright, another thing I like to do is just put a little bit of grease on the end of the cable ends where it goes into the handle. You don't want to overdo it, just a little bit there so it can have a little bit of lubrication in the handle itself. So just rub a little grease on there, and that way it'll help the lubrication in the handle and make it a little bit smoother and last a little bit longer. Alright, so got the cable back in and got the clutch adjusted. It's right about 2 millimeters of free play. And what you do to take this cable out, I don't know if I really explained it, is you just unlock the lock screw here, and then you can just rotate this screw it all the way in to loosen up this cable, and then you can just kind of pull out on the cable a little bit. It'll slide out of this top adjuster here, and you line up, there's two grooves, one here in the cable, or in the lock collar, and one in the bolt here. So you just align those two grooves, pull the cable out of the handle here, and it all comes right out. So that's how you get the cable out to lube it, and then just put it back in the same way. Screw your adjuster back out, lock it down, and like I said, get 2 to 3 millimeters of free play, and that's what I'm at. I'm about 2, and it should be good to go. We'll try it out here in a little bit. One thing I should say too is after lubricating the cable, this clutch is moving much smoother than it was. So I just like to, work it a little bit, let all that lube that's down in that cable kind of work its way through and work its way out, all the excess, and you can clean up your mess afterwards down at the bottom. But then also, once this all kind of dries in the cable sheathing and the housing, it makes it a nice smooth lubrication for the cable, make your cable last a lot longer and your clutch work a lot smoother.